This year is barely a week old, not even 2 weeks old, and it is utterly insane. What's up? My name is Fred Richani. This is TSC News. We cover combat sports, football, and everything in between. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. Some breaking news here. A lot of the times I now cover wrestling, usually it's a lot of bad news. And I don't know if this is bad news, but it's not necessarily good news, especially if you're a WWE shareholder. Stephanie McMahon, aka the daughter of Vince McMahon, aka the Chairwoman CEO, she is no longer with WWE. I'm going to repeat that again. Stephanie McMahon has resigned from WWE. This comes off of the heels of Vince McMahon, as per the Wall Street Journal report, and then him confirming it by actually doing it. He effectively, believe it or not, on January 6th, like a true scumbag, formed a coup in his own board. And he forced himself as the majority shareholder back on the WWE board, brought back Michelle Wilson and George Barrios, who he had previously fired a couple years ago before hiring Nick Conn. Got rid of, I believe, 2 board members. A couple others resigned, including one gentleman who was leading the investigation on Vince McMahon with the SEC and improper funds and, NDAs that we didn't know about and all that jazz. Vince McMahon, according to documents that were uncovered by various reports, was warned, hey, maybe you shouldn't come back. Hey, there could be more damning evidence. It's not in the best interest of the company. Vince McMahon saw that there's a window of opportunity to, 1, not only sell WWE, but 2, negotiate a brand new lucrative media rights package in the coming year. Said, nope, this is the time for me. This is my excuse. I'm not going to be involved creatively. Yeah, right. And just a few short days later, Vince McMahon back in WWE, Stephanie McMahon gone from WWE. And this is just absolutely nuts. This is like Succession. This is like Billions on Showtime, but like on steroids, probably literally and figuratively here. So here's what Stephanie McMahon said online. She released this statement via Twitter. Dear WWE Universe, about 8 months ago, I took a leave of absence and within a few weeks, unexpectedly had the opportunity of a lifetime. I had the privilege to return as the co-CEO and chairwoman of the board of WWE. I cannot put into words how proud I am to have led what I consider to be the greatest company in the world, working alongside a remarkable leadership team and one of the strongest executives I have known in my co-CEO, Nick Conn. Our founder, Vince McMahon, has returned as executive chair and is leading an exciting process regarding strategic alternatives. And with Nick's leadership and Paul Triple H Levesque, her husband, as chief content officer, I am confident WWE is in the perfect place to continue to provide unparalleled creative content and drive maximum value for shareholders. WWE is in such a strong position that I've decided to return to my leave and take it one step further with my official resignation. I look forward to cheering on WWE from the other side of the business, where I started when I was a little kid as a pure fan. I will always remain dedicated to WWE. I truly love our company, our employees, our superstars, and our fans, and I am grateful to all our partners. Thank you for everything. Then, now, forever together, Steph. Before I get into any other thoughts, holy doodle squat. This is a gigantic story. Your co-CEO, who also happens to be your daughter, in the case of the chairman, or the newly appointed previous chairman, Vince McMahon, resigning? Yeah, not taking a leave of absence, resigning. That, to me, is a big deal. Now, why was it a bad idea on the surface for Vince McMahon to come back, besides the obvious that he's a scumbag and he's going to burn in hell? Well, in theory, a guy who is a credibly accused sex pest abuser would tank a company's stock price. Now, that hasn't happened as of yet because of the fact that I don't think it's so much Vince McMahon coming back that drove up the stock price, but more so rumors of a sale, right? Could be Endeavor, who also owns UFC and CAA. Could be Liberty Media. It could be Disney, Netflix. Amazon's obviously always in the mix as well. NBC Universal, aka Comcast, which paid an exorbitant amount of money for WWE on Peacock. So we will see what happens there. But Stephanie McMahon leaving, I think, on the surface is definitely a bad look. And I think what's also a bad look is the fact that there's still a dark cloud from Vince McMahon looming here. He never admitted to any wrongdoing. There was one thing with a secretary that he had promoted over and over again and allegedly passed her like a toy to John Laurinaitis, who's now long gone. And he admitted that that relationship, I believe, was consensual. But he never was culpable for any of his crimes. He never showed any remorse, any contrition. He never was like, oh, maybe there was... He never at least even hinted at an inkling of a misunderstanding or that he could have possibly been an a-hole or abusive or whatever in the past. And here he is back, and just all kinds of crazy rumors flying around. I think the worst case scenario, and take away the politics of it all and everything else, if WWE is able to go private, whether it be with Saudi money or some other... Yep, I'm still on the call, folks. I'm live. There we go. Yeah, if WWE is able to take the company private, or Vince McMahon specifically is able to take the company private and to remain in power and to be put in place as a CEO, or as the chair, remain as the chairman, but also the creative force, that to me is the worst case scenario. Because a few things and this is to me is the least important aspect. From a creative standpoint, the company's already not exactly inspired beyond the bloodline. Bianca's carrying the women's division as much as she can. And Becky Lynch and Bayley and all that jazz. But for the most part, the only really consistently good to great thing is the bloodline. Vince McMahon, as we saw the last few years, really lost the plot, really lost his mind. He didn't get it right with Bianca, but, seriously, like, a stump could get it right with Bianca. She's got the star written all over her, generational talent. But more often than not, he got it wrong, as we saw over and over and over again, with his ability to get people under, not over. The human resources aspect is really bad, because with new ownership in general, no matter what happens, whether a company stays public or private, there's probably going to be people who lose jobs, and that's really unfortunate. And people who have nothing to do with the awful alleged crimes of Vince McMahon and some of these other awful people like Kevin Dunn who work with him. F Kevin Dunn, by the way. But it's the possibility that not only could WWE go private and get lots of money, but go private and allow itself to cover up Vince McMahon's past alleged crimes and possibly future alleged crimes. And to the point where the guy will get away with it. Now, who knows? Maybe there's more to come. Maybe a bomb will drop. And I know it's bad to say, I'm rooting for somebody's downfall or something like that. But you know what? Like, guys like Vince McMahon and Dana White and their good buddy, the orange guy, man, at some point, some of these dudes have to suffer some consequences. Obviously, the levels are a little different, right? Dana White, Conn camera, probably always been, or at least for a while now, been an abusive scumbag, awful business practices. Vince McMahon, awful business practices, credibly accused abuser, harbored a lot of abusers. In the case of, their buddy Trump, self-explanatory. If you need me to elaborate, you could do a freaking Google search, read a book or something. But, at some point, some of these rich pieces of shit, similar to Harvey Weinstein, need to actually face some consequences here. No matter how much money they have. Whether they will or won't, that remains to be seen. In the case of Dana White, doesn't seem like it right now. In the case of Vince McMahon, doesn't seem like it right now. But from what I understand, there is still a chance that the SEC is investigating Vince McMahon, and there's still a chance that another bomb could drop in terms of more allegations, more stories, more improper use of funds at the very least, which would get him the hell out of there. And as of right now, Nick Conn is the sole CEO of WWE left. Triple H is still with the company for now. But good God almighty, if you're William Regal, who got a sweetheart deal with AEW, and I'm not hating on William Regal, by the way, and Tony Khan did the right thing by letting him go to WWE, and Tony Khan, say what you want about him, he could be a little overzealous on Twitter, I don't like some things sometimes, but you know what, like, overall he seems like a really decent guy, at least by billionaire standards, and so let William Regal go. But imagine being William Regal, you're on like the best run you've had in years in AEW. You know what I mean? You're walking on water. You're involved in all these storylines. You're involved with Maxwell Jacob Friedman, who's a generational talent. And you hit the green light to go back to WWE in a major talent relations position, which he excelled at, which he was great at. I'm not going to say he was bad at that. He was amazing at that. And hey, if he wants to go back and be with his son, great. But imagine you're William Regal. And you're like, oh, thank you, Tony. And you get this nice send-off and everything. And then the guy who fired you comes back to power. Your best friend, Triple H, could possibly be on the outs. your best friend's wife, who happened to be the CEO, is out. Man, if you're William Regal, if you're Karrion Kross, if you're any of these dudes that were rehired back, yeah, if you're on the bubble, I'd be looking around going, oh man, this ain't good. This ain't good. And there's a lot of uncertainty because Vince McMahon's presence is not the best thing in the world for the TV rights deals because he is kind of radioactive, right? There is also the chance that if he does sell to somebody, let's just say he sells to the Saudis, right? Well, no matter how you feel about the Saudi Sports Entertainment Authority, whatever the case may be, they had trouble getting the golf off the ground, getting a TV deal here. Could be the same case for WWE, even though WWE is an institution and has been a proven ratings draw for years and years. A lot of companies, as David Bixenspan, talked about on Twitter, and I would agree with him, might say, you know what, it's not worth the headache. Now, would that necessarily mean that they'd invest in AEW instead, which would come much cheaper and probably with comparable ratings? I don't know. In a perfect world, I'd say yes, because AEW could probably offer up some comparable ratings in the right time slot. Maybe not so much for SmackDown, but perhaps for Raw with the right promotion. But who knows? Tony Khan, his company that's only been around 3 years, has been a great draw for Warner Brothers Discovery, for Warner Media, and they couldn't get a TV deal for Ring of Honor. They couldn't even get a streaming deal for Ring of Honor. They couldn't even be thrown on HBO Max. They couldn't even be thrown on Discovery Plus. What does that say about how the public or the media views wrestling right now? Right? I mean, maybe they just don't want what's perceived as minor league wrestling, but it's interesting. You see WBD, whether you agree with what they're doing or not, cutting a lot of costs, removing HBO shows from platforms, including successful shows like Westworld, which maybe wasn't so successful after all, at least in their eyes. Cutting ties to Henry Cavill, at least as Superman, cutting ties to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as Black Adam. So there's no guarantee. I mean, they could retain AEW for sure, and especially if AEW doesn't have a lot of options for sure, but there's still a chance that maybe they won't spend as much money as AEW expects, and that could hurt them with free agents and everything else. But if WWE's in turmoil, if Vince McMahon gets power, if he's able to take the company private, if the strings attached to Vince McMahon being the forerunner and making this sale, if the strings attached include him staying in power or getting back in power as far as creatively, there could be more mass layoffs in WWE on the talent side and on the employee side. And look, AEW can only employ so many people. Ring of Honor, which is now a subsidiary of AEW, can only employ so many people. New Japan Pro Wrestling ain't what it was a few years ago, even though they had a really good Wrestle Kingdom show. Shout out to Mercedes Moné, a.k.a. Sasha Banks, who did a phenomenal job generating buzz for that show and the San Jose show. A lot of uncertainty right now in the world of pro wrestling, and it's kind of scary, actually, if you are a pro wrestler. Christian Studios says, holy doodle squat. JJ Bulldog says, I knew this was coming. Donovan Martin says, this is crazy. No one is safe. I'm worried about Hunter and Bray. Bray's another one. Although, you know what? I mean, I don't really like what Bray's doing creatively. But if Vince McMahon cuts this guy again when he's a top merchandise seller, and I know he was a top merch seller before he got released the first time, but this time he's still right at the top. Again, whether I like the creative or not, he's drawn some money for him. And there is something there. If they ever get to the point with this guy, there is still something there that you can capitalize on. And yeah, if they cut him, that'd be crazy. Braun Strowman, same thing. I forgot about him. That guy was making, $1 million a year, so a couple million. And let's keep it real, folks. A lot of these talents, even though they're getting paid good money, and I don't really care for Braun Strowman too much, but I'm just saying, pretty much all these talents are underpaid commensurate to what WWE's earning. I don't know if it's as bad as UFC, because at least, the guys and girls in WWE, they're getting royalties from video games and other stuff, whereas UFC, they're not even getting royalties for video games, believe it or not. It's freaking crazy for their likeness. But it's a low bar, right? So it is a really scary time right now. I think if you are a pro wrestler, if you're Roman Reigns, I think you're fine. If you're one of the top guys in the mix, I think you're fine. But it's going to be interesting. And, it's interesting, too, with The Rock. Again, fairly or unfairly, there are people who look at him differently now after the whole DC Universe controversy and everything else. And some people will say it's fair, some will say it's not. Who cares? My point is, The Rock may say, you know what, I'm trying to rehab my image a little bit here. From the box office disappointment that is Black Adam. I personally enjoyed it, but I'm just saying. maybe he won't want to be associated with a company in turmoil, even if he gets paid millions of dollars to do WrestleMania. Who knows? Maybe he will. I mean, it's going to be interesting. I mean, I don't know if this is going to affect immediate plans, because WrestleMania season is always WrestleMania season, and that people are going to watch WrestleMania just for the name alone. But it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think we'll really see where things go after WrestleMania, right? Will this speed up the process for Roman Reigns to go Hollywood? He's already had a limited schedule. Maybe he'll decide, and it depends on obviously opportunities he could get in Hollywood. But maybe he'll decide, like, you know what? Like, there's some great opportunities here. I'm going to take a hiatus and, try my hand in acting for real, like John Cena and Batista and, The Rock. And Roman Reigns has already been in a couple films. The small sample size I've seen him in, he's great. He's on the best run of his career. He's shown great acting skills as a heel. Who knows? Cody Rhodes. Yeah, he could probably win the world title if The Rock doesn't come back. But then what? What happens then? Randy Orton. His future, and for reasons unrelated to this potential sale and everything, are uncertain, right? He's got a bad back and everything else, and who knows? He could maybe he'd retire. I don't know. It's just a lot of uncertainty right now. AEW, I feel like, has had a string of really good shows, and while I don't like how the company's handled the CM Punk situation, effectively saying, "Oh, the VPs are innocent," but CM Punk's this bad guy, when in reality, it's like, I feel like it's more in the middle. Like, everybody was kind of in the wrong, and whatever stuff we can impress. I feel like AEW in recent weeks has had some really good shows and really hot crowds, and I really like the new production. And they've been doing under 1 million viewers and 800,000 something last week. And again, commensurate it to how many people are watching TV on prime time and everything else with TBS and TNT. Like, they're still doing really well. They still deserve a big raise, but you just don't know. That's the problem. You just don't know. Will the WWE name sell? Yeah. Will Vince McMahon actually accept the sale? I don't know. It is very possible that Vince McMahon used the sale and all this other BS just to get to power, just so he could put the poison pill clause in the contract for the sale, which is, well, I'll sell it to you for $5 billion or whatever the hell it is, maybe more, but I have to be guaranteed that I'm in charge of creative and in a position of power. And if that's the case, a lot of these companies, these media companies who are media conscious and PR conscious, might say, Vince, thanks, but no thanks. Which would mean what? Which would mean, oh, the company's not for sale? Vince would just remain in charge. And again, the worst case scenario, or maybe the second worst case scenario, would be Vince McMahon getting enough money to sell the company, taking it private, and remaining in power, which means effectively, for all the awful things he's done and allegedly done, he would get away with it, which would be just disgusting and, quite frankly, a big reason why you don't see me covering wrestling as much these days, because you see all this awful bad behavior that's enabled and nothing happens. From Ashley Massaro, God rest her soul, to the Owen Hart back in the day, to all the drug. It's insane, man. It's insane. Like, bury this guy under the jail already. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I'm trying to see if there's any other factoids, any information that we can conjure up before I hop off here on this impromptu live stream. If you're listening on the podcast, on Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcasts, I appreciate y'all too. We'll also be uploading this on Facebook. Oh, my goodness gracious. Also, too, something notable about Stephanie McMahon, whether you think she was just a walking piece of corporate jargon or not, not hating. But, it felt like she was always just using buzzwords all the time. The reality is she was kind of the face of the company, the very public face of the company. And, that they just lost the face of their company. It's very interesting. That being said, there is, I don't know. There is also a part of me that doesn't really feel bad for her. I feel bad for what Triple H went through with the, Hart situation. But, here's the thing with WWE. I feel bad for the employees that are in turmoil or could be in turmoil. I feel bad for the wrestlers. I feel bad for all the past wrestlers and employees who have been harassed, who have been abused, who have been, maligned unjustly over the years that never got, their due, their respect. Some no longer here with us. I don't really feel bad for the McMahon family and the enablers because, and I know Stephanie grew up in the business, so maybe I'm a little too hard on her. but she is also a 40-something-year-old woman at this point. Like, Vince McMahon didn't do this alone. He didn't abuse women alone. He didn't allegedly, assault women alone. He didn't, exploit labor alone. There were people over the years who enabled him. And yes, some of the current wrestlers too are dumb for looking at, and even past wrestlers are dumb for looking at their boss as a father figure, a guy who exploited them, who underpaid them, who, used and abused them as a father figure. Even, I love John Cena, but come on, man. Like, you can be grateful for your boss giving you an opportunity, but at the end of the day, your boss hired you because they need you. And whether that's retail, whether that's advertising, whether that's, driving a bus, or whether that's, being a top star in WWE, like, a promoter hires you because they need you. If they didn't need you, they wouldn't hire you. Now, however they use you is how they use you. It's arbitrary, right? But, like, I don't know. There's a part of me that kind of likes seeing this company burn down a little bit. Not the collateral damage, which would be the talent, the employees, their families. That's god-awful, and I hope that doesn't happen for their sake. But just, again, this guy has decades upon decades upon decades of atrocities, of alleged atrocities, of proven atrocities, allegedly covered up a murder for Jimmy Snuka, kept the show going when Owen Hart died, which was practically an active crime scene, kept the show going when Jerry Lawler practically died with a heart attack 10 years ago. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's been enabled over time. So it's not just he's like this lone bad guy. Again, to compare him to Trump, like, it's not just him, right? There's other people around him who enabled him. It's not just Bernie Madoff, which, by the way, great documentary series just dropped on Netflix. There's other people around Bernie Madoff who enabled him, some who suffered consequences, some who didn't. And quite frankly, I'd like to see some consequences suffered not just by Vince McMahon, but by Kevin Dunn and by other people. And look, I got a lot of respect for Triple H, as a wrestler, and some of the things he's done in NXT, but he's also harbored a lot of bad people like Road Dogg, who's been accused of, and actually on record said some awful things on Twitter. Right? The same guy who kept Velveteen Dream employed, the same guy who kept Austin Theory employed after some allegations. The same guy that kept Jordan Devlin employed after his partner or ex-partner posted photos of her beaten up by him. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're all culpable here in some capacity, and Stephanie McMahon too. And I know she's been in the business for pretty much her whole life, and I'm sure she hasn't had a normal life, and it's been a very confusing life. But the reality is, this woman's 40-something years old. She's a grown-ass woman. She's a parent. And, all you can make, other than maybe Nick Conn, who has, not been around long enough to really kind of see that whole side of Vince McMahon, or at least, the side that we saw in all these different documentaries about Vince. But other than, like, Nick Conn, right, and maybe Frank Riddick, perhaps, like, most of these people have been enablers of Vince McMahon, privy to, accessories to some of these crimes. Maybe they didn't commit them. Maybe they didn't directly abuse these women. Maybe they were like, see no evil, hear no evil. But the reality is they were still accessories to this one man's god-awful, unethical, unlawful, criminal behavior for decades. So I'm going to sing the same song and dance I have for years for the people who've been following me. There should be consequences. This guy should be taken down. There needs to be a complete overhaul. You can make the strong argument that while this is a great company as far as generating ratings and revenue and everything else, that it's rotten at its core. But then again, there's still video game companies with some rotten CEOs. There's still other publicly traded and private companies with rotten CEOs, rotten chairmen, who are still in power. But it's just, I don't know, man. Like, there's got to be some consequences here. And this, I guess, disintegrating relationship with his daughter and her resigning, I feel like it's just collateral damage. And I don't know. What do you say to that? Danny on Twitter says, say what you want about Stephanie, but all the women in WWE love Stephanie. Losing that one boss you don't totally hate that you can connect with on a level you can't with others. Woof. That is true. That is true. Are there any other women in power in WWE that the women can relate to? Not really. All right. Let's see. So Raj Giri says, I've asked around and Triple H is in firmly as chief content officer. Yeah. Just like Vince McMahon was firmly in retirement. I'm not saying that Raj is wrong. I'm just saying, you know, a lot can change and everything. Chelsea Green was reported to be going back to WWE. Who knows? I mean, who knows? Weren't her and Matt Cardona rumored to be going to WWE? If you're heading to WWE now, do you want to be there? Oh man, not yikes. Ryan Papola, who hosts, I think is one of the hosts of The Bump in WWE and hosts some other Peacock content, said all of us in 9 days into 2023, and it's Kevin Owens' face in a turnbuckle, which Rhea Ripley retweeted. And Sean Ross Sapp tweets out, and this is a screenshot from the WWE Corporate website. WWE Board of Directors unanimously elects Vince McMahon Executive Chairman of the Board. Oh boy. John Alba tweets, it is worth a reminder that the WWE Board unanimously disapproved of Vince McMahon's return in writing. That board included Stephanie McMahon, Nick Conn, and Paul Levesque. Good effing Lord, man. Just crazy, crazy times all around. Christian says, I agree with what you say about Stephanie. She never said he was in the wrong. Seems like she's taken his side over the whole ordeal. Yeah. Vinny Assad, is there any way if the Saudis buy, the Americans can stop the purchase? That's a good question. I don't think legally they can, no. I mean, look, let me let y'all in a little secret. The U.S. does some awful business. You know, the U.S. government does some awful business with some awful entities, including some other countries, all around the world. You know, if you do a quick TikTok search and look up some of the atrocities, I don't want to get on a soapbox, but I love being in America, but America's got a lot of flaws, and this government's got a lot of interests, which let's just say there's a reason this country is looked at as the bad guys in other countries, and justifiably so. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, they could. I feel like it'd be a little contradictory, considering, you know, I believe the U.S. is still trading with Saudi Arabia in terms of, you know, weapons, oil, stuff like that. But you never know. Maybe somebody in the SEC wants to be a hero and say, hey, no, we can't allow this. You know, because it is publicly traded. But if the caveat is that if the Saudis buy it, they turn it private, I mean, can they really stop it from going private? I don't know. And also, Saudi Arabia does have some money, whether it be money we know about or not, in Twitter, and they have money in Vice TV and some other entities. So I think we're kind of long past that point of the U.S. preventing any kind of international organizations. I mean, for a while, I don't think it's still on the air, but RT, right, was technically Russian state media, and I think I had that on YouTube TV in my package randomly, right? So, and that was funded by, well, you guessed it, Russia. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a little complicated. I get what you're saying, though. I will say this. I think if the Saudis did buy it, again, fairly or unfairly, whether you think it's xenophobic or you think it's justified or whatever else, I could see that being a harbinger for some media companies who are doing deals with WWE, saying, you know what, we don't know if we want to be involved with this, which, again, hypocrisy everywhere because, you know, look at all these Middle Eastern powerhouses investing in all these soccer teams, right? All these football teams in the Premier League and La Liga and everything else. So it's hypocrisy all around. I don't know. It's really hard to tell. But I do me personally as a human, it would pain me to see WWE go private with Vince McMahon in charge because, again, it gives him more protection. It would allow him to, quote unquote, get away with it even more than he already has. So, you know, look, as somebody who believes he's a terrible person, and as somebody who believes that there's definitely more that they're not telling us, I really hope some of that stuff does come out. I really do. Because I do genuinely believe he's a bad person. And, you know, that being said, if you're a media company, I don't blame you for necessarily doing business, right? There's a lot of unsavory people who, you know, create films and TV and content. Like, I mean, WWE's a proven property. Why wouldn't you want that on your station? But yeah, it is what it is, man. It is what it is. Thanos asks, well, Thanos, you're still alive. Why is everyone worrying she resigned? I mean, when your CEO resigns abruptly, and she also happens to be the daughter of the chairman. I'd say that's pretty alarming, man. I would say that would set some alarms if you ask me. I'm just saying. I would say that would set some alarms. I just try to dig for a little more information before we hop off. Obviously, if anything else comes up, I'll hop off. By the way, as I'm recording this, NXT still hasn't aired. It's 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. So this bomb dropped right before NXT. All right. So okay, Fightful Select has a little bit more. WWE confirmed to By the way, FightfulSelect.com, they do great work. WWE confirmed to Fightful that Nick Khan would be serving as solo CEO of the company, and it was reiterated via WWE source that Triple H is still Chief Content Officer and in charge of live events and talent. This has repeatedly been stressed to us. It was portrayed to Fightful as if Stephanie McMahon was resuming the leave of absence she'd taken last year before returning to work months later when Vince stepped down and later retired. Stephanie has remained well-liked among staff and talent that we've spoken to, as has Nick Khan, who will assume more of her duties. Stephanie led an employee meeting on January 6th where she admitted there's naturally some animosity before correcting the term to angst regarding some feelings about Vince McMahon forcing his way back in. Much of Stephanie's own team was dismantled in major cuts during the pandemic. Oof. Also, shout out to Linda McMahon, who's an absolute scumbag. Can I just say that real quick? I know we're giving flack to Stephanie and everything else for, allegedly enabling some bad behavior, to say the least. But, Linda McMahon, I believe, was CEO of WWE or had, some type of high role. I believe it was CEO of WWE for years and years and years and years. And never mind the fact that she's publicly allowed herself to be humiliated and have no shame. I guess they've been legally separated for years, whatever. But for her aligning herself with people that try to overthrow elections and all that jazz. She's just grade A scumbag. There's also a special place in hell for Linda McMahon. And hey, if I were running things, I would also put her in the prison, right above Vince, who would be buried underneath the prison. But anyway, so several WWE talent messaged Fightful, very confused by the situation, asking what it really meant for both Stephanie McMahon and Nick Khan. The general consensus Fightful gauged was uncertainty of what a move like this actually means. And if you want some more updates, like I said, FightfulSelect.com, they do a fantastic job. Sean also broke the stories about Stone Cold coming back, CM Punk coming back, so he does some amazing work. But good God Almighty, yeah, this is crazy. This is crazy. I don't really know what else this means. It just. We'll see what listen. We'll see what happens. It's very likely bad behavior will once again be rewarded, and all this will be for naught. And it won't matter whether, in true narcissistic fashion, it won't matter that this guy has severed ties with his family or fractured ties with his family for life, however long his decrepit life still has. As long as he's back in power, running the show, and doing whatever the hell he wants with little to no consequences, and that could very well happen, but. I don't know. I guess I'm just rooting for whatever happens. He goes down. He gets properly prosecuted, penalized, whatever. And all the employees and wrestlers who have nothing to do with this, who are decent people just trying to make a living, not including obviously the scumbag enablers, I hope they could just ride this out and be all right. But it is, if we thought 2022 was tumultuous in wrestling, from the in-ring stuff like Cody and Steve Austin and CM Punk, to the out-of-the-ring stuff like CM Punk and Vince McMahon stepping down and all this other crap, 2023 is set to be even crazier. So we'll see what happens. If I can make a bold prediction, if WWE is going to sell to somebody, I'm going to say either NBC Universal or the Saudis. So we shall see what happens there. Raymond Turner says WWE is going down the toilet. Hey, excuse me. Anything's possible. Anything's possible. It's, they are a consistent ratings mover, though. So, live event business, a little wishy-washy compared to previous times in the before the pandemic, outside of their big shows like their pay-per-views and overseas shows and everything else. But look, that library's worth money. That company's got so many social media followers and everything else. Like, they have so many streams of revenue. Somebody's going to want it. Whether they want it, again, with these strings attached, that Vince McMahon has to remain in charge, with the dark cloud looming over of possibly more allegations coming to light. That remains to be seen. Do you think wrestlers will walk out if he gets creative control? No. Unfortunately, and you look, respect to most of the wrestlers, but I'm just going to say this. I don't want to say a lot of these dudes are gutless because that might be too harsh. A lot of these dudes, and when I say dudes, I mean men and women and non-binary people, just people in general, talent in general. I feel like they're just not, I don't know. It's a lot of people are happy to be there. A lot of people are making good money and don't want to rock the boat. And I don't necessarily blame them. You know, the schedule post-pandemic, or we're still in the pandemic, but post-2020 does seem a lot more manageable than it did before. But yeah, I mean, they're still underpaid. And, you know, it would be the time for wrestlers to really stand up for themselves would have been when WWE eliminated like kind of like the third party stuff with like Twitch and YouTube and everything else. And, you know, from what I understand, I do recall, I think it was AJ Styles, Xavier Woods, and Zelina, who later quit and was rehired, did all stand up for themselves. But as a whole, like, these wrestlers got to be united. It's like the same thing with fighters, right? I could beat the dead horse about how fighters should be paid more and everything else, but until they stand up for themselves, until they either unionize or at least have like a united front, you know, nothing's going to change there. You know, now it might be different because if the Ali Act's instilled, that means there's going to be more transparency with salaries like in boxing. I mean, it's not like boxers have a union, but they have the Ali Act, so it's just, you know, it's more transparent. They're able to get paid more money. Perhaps that could come to a head with MMA in the next 5 years or so, but with wrestling, I don't know. I mean, listen, man, when UFC got sold and when UFC got that huge ESPN deal and then when they got that other huge ESPN deal, I really thought maybe there's a chance that fighters may step up to the plate and say, hey, where's all this TV money for us, right? And I thought the same thing in 2019 when WWE got those huge deals from Fox and NBC. I was like, hey, maybe some wrestlers are going to wake up and say, hey, we're going to get something on that back end. You know, a lot of people call CM Punk an a-hole, and he might be. I don't know him personally. But, you know, the guy always made sure he got paid. And I bet, you know, some of these top stars like Roman Reigns individually made sure they got paid. But in order for everybody, yeah, they got to come together. There's got to be some strength in numbers. You know, maybe not everybody needs to get together on the roster, but if like half the roster banded together at least, like they can't fight. I mean, I guess they could technically fire everybody, but I don't know. Strength in numbers, man. There's got to be something that changes. Oh my goodness. Seems like everybody in WWE fears Vince. Yeah. As we saw, you know, a lot of people said good things about him, and maybe they said good things about him because they had an inkling that he would eventually come back. Okay. Shout out to my dude, DJ Black Dude. And everyone told me, oh no, you're looking too deep into this. Yeah, who's overreacting now? Exactly. Well, I'm hopping out of here. I'm starting to lose my voice. I just did an awesome interview with my buddy James Griffin. He is a baseball writer on the Baseball Hall of Fame. Some rare baseball content coming to TSC. So that'll be dropping in the next couple of days. When I get my voice back, I'll be uploading some more updates on everything that's going on. But in the meantime, I appreciate everybody checking out this impromptu live stream. I appreciate everybody listening on the podcast. I appreciate y'all rocking with me. If I didn't get a chance to say it to you yet, Happy New Year. Hope you guys had a great holiday season. I hope everybody has a spectacular 2023. Not gonna lie, 2023 been a little rough so far, but definitely looking forward to big things ahead. And no matter what happens in wrestling in this crazy world that we like to follow that pisses us off sometimes, like I really genuinely hope that everybody is doing well, or is at least on the path of doing well, because I love all y'all and I really appreciate the support. So let's hope these bad people get what's coming to them. And again, for the people who aren't involved, who are just trying to make a living, like the talent, like a lot of the employees, I hope it all works out for them in the end as well. But let me know what you think. Leave a comment below if you enjoyed this update or maybe didn't enjoy it. Like, dislike, share, take care. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more updates like this. We've got tons of interviews if you're new here with The Big Show, Anthony Bowens, Mark Henry, the list, Thunder Rosa, the list goes on and on. But until next time, everybody, as always, enjoy the matches and stay out of trouble.